Hi guys, welcome back to the DxO PhotoLab series. I'm back in sunny Spain after the rain and fog-drenched time we spent in England, and today we're going to do a deep dive into the tone curve. So in the tone curve, what we want to demonstrate is how is it different to the contrast slider. This is something that's quite difficult to spot, and it's very easy for people that are new to the software to get into a bit of a muddle with the tone curve. What we're going to do is to demonstrate with the aid of colour charts exactly what the difference is so that you'll know what to expect with each slider. And when we've done that, we'll go through a basic workflow using both the contrast tool and the tone curve on a real picture. So let's get into it. Okay, let's have a look at the contrast tool first of all, and we're going to follow that up with a detailed look at the tone curve, but I think it's important to see how these two tools are related and what you can expect from one as opposed to the other, and also what the effect is of having both tools switched on and working together or against one another, as we'll see. This is we've got a smooth black to white gradient here, and starting off with the contrast tool, if we move this to the right, okay, you can see that we've got more blacks and more whites. Move it to the left to reduce the contrast. We've got less pure black and the grey area has expanded. So we're flattening this picture out. Take a look at what happens in the histogram when I do this. So move it back to the middle and you can see the histogram flattening out. Move it to the right and you can see the accentuation on the whites and an accentuation on the blacks. Now, this is basically a set piece. I'm not going to get any different result by moving this. You know, it's a continuous curve, and it's modelled on the S curve that we'll see in a minute in the tone curve. So contrast, simply reduce contrast there, add it in as we go to the middle. You see that flattening out, and you see it increasingly moving out to the edges as we go to the right. Now, let's have a look and see what happens with the tone curve. So I'm going to use the master curve, and what the master curve does is combine the red, green and blue channels with the luminance channel. So first of all, let's check the end points. So this is the blackest black, and we can move that towards grey by moving it up here. So we're up at 70 here, and we've got that pretty much close to grey. Move it along here. Now if we move it to the right, what we see is the blacks, the extent of the black gets more and more and more. Okay, and we can move that all the way there, and we have all black and clear white. If we take our white channel, we can reduce the white point, so now we're getting greyer, greyer and greyer, so our pure whites are no longer in the thing, and look and see how this is reflecting in the histogram. And similarly, if we move it along, we'll expect to see the whites getting whiter and pushing those blacks down towards the left-hand side until we get there. We've got a very narrow strip of black and the rest of it is all white. Okay, so none of that can be done in the contrast tool, and actually, to be fair, you wouldn't want to go that far in a real photograph. I'm simply showing you what the tool is capable of, and perhaps this is why we get into such trouble with the tone curve. Now, modelling a typical contrasty picture, you're typically going to use an S-curve that looks something like that. And that's very similar to the sort of results we were getting from the contrast tool. Okay, and so what we're doing here is we're pulling the darks down, so the darks are here, and we're pushing the lights up. So the lights are on the right-hand side, and the middle section is what we refer to as the gamma. Okay, so let's have a look at the gamma control. Now what we start off with here is the straight line, and the gamma control, if I drop this to values below 1, basically takes from the middle of the curve, drags it down, extends the blacks, and if we go in the opposite direction, we'll see the opposite effect. So the black's getting less, white's getting more, and the black is getting pushed down towards the left-hand side. And you can see that reflected up here in the histogram as well. So let's return this to the central point. So what you're seeing is effectively a way of making the picture lighter or darker. Now, if we create our S-curve, I'm going to exaggerate this to make it more obvious so you can actually see what's happening. So if I make my blacks dark there and I pull my white point up here, you can see that I've got 2 points, right? Now what happens when I move the gamma is you'll see the points move, but you'll see that the integrity of the curve is maintained. So our contrast, our gamma, what our gamma is doing is effectively shifting the entire curve, keeping the contrast values that I'd placed into it, right? So this is something that you can use in the definition of real photographs. You can set your darks, you can set your brights, and you can just tweak the mids, maintaining that contrasty look to the photograph. So let's reset that, and now, keeping with the black and white curve, let's have a look and see what we do with the controls here. Now if we look at the red curve, let's increase the gamma, and you can see the red creeping into the picture. Now, if we decrease the gamma, we're getting the cyan. So this is a very effective way, using the curve, to increase the reds or increase the cyans, depending which way you move it. Let's look at the greens. Okay, so we'll pull the greens up, and at the dark end you can see it going green. If I pull them up at this end, you can see that green fading in from the white. Use the gamma, and you can see the green beginning to come into the picture. Okay, and similarly with the blue, except wait 1 second because we haven't seen what's the opposite of green, and it's magenta. So these are values you would see opposite one another on the colour wheel. Now if we go to the blue curve, let's just reset that green one, go to the blue, use the gamma, increase the value of the blue, Wait for it to catch up. There you go. There's your blue creeping in, and we want to reduce that. And the opposite of blue is yellow, and we can expect to see that appearing in the picture. Okay, so this shows the capability of the tone curve, and what we're really looking to do with the tone curve is to use it to effectively give us more subtlety than the contrast curve is capable of giving. And these things do work together. So if I move my contrast curve up here, and again I'll exaggerate this so that you can see the extent. So if I make this accentuating the whites, accentuating the blacks, and I can move opposite that here, lightening the blacks, darkening my whites, and that more or less cancels out the contrast curve. So the point here I'm trying to make is that you can get into a terrible muddle because these controls don't show exactly what the state of play is in one another, because they are doing different things. So I wouldn't expect my contrast to modify the tone curve, because the tone curve is actually doing something a little bit different, although the effects are seen quite readily on the screen. So it's as well to be aware that this is happening. You can go against the values of your contrast tool and the tone curve, similarly adjusting the contrast tool after you've done the tone curve. So if I go here and I go here, and we've got a nice thick band of dark, a nice thick band of whites, a nice thick band of grey. And if I push that again, now I'm really squashing the greys. I've got much more black, much more white. And that is, if I switch my tone curve off, you can see that makes an immediate change in the value of that contrast curve. So something to watch out for when you're doing this in real life, as it were. I want to have a look now and see the effects on a colour gradient. So this is getting closer to real life. So if I increase my contrast, okay, you can see the dividing lines beginning to come into focus between each colour. If I reduce the contrast, it gets much murkier. So very, very gradual change from red to yellow, green, and so on. Put that back. And in my tone curve, if I reduce my darks, and this is where it gets interesting, is it's not affecting all of the colours. And this is the thing that is a real difference between the two controls. So my lights here are affecting the yellows and the greens and the blues down here, very obviously. And my dark areas here is affecting the red, the dark blue, and the cyan. And if I go into the red channel, and let's just do this from the gamma perspective. Okay, now I'm increasing the value of the red. And if I take that back, I'll be increasing the value. If I take that back, I'll be increasing the value of the cyan in the picture. So reset that. So what we can take away from this is that the effect of these curves, although it's very, although you can see it very readily in the luminance, it's harder to make out when you've got the full colour wheel. So simply reducing that a little, you can see the effect up here, but not so much anywhere else. And when you're editing an actual picture, as we're going to see in a moment, this becomes very important, because if you maintain your awareness of the opposite, so if we're looking at red and cyan, we're looking at green and magenta, and we're looking at blue and yellow, and this is the way you can affect the tonal range of the entire photograph. Okay, so let's see how these tools work in real life. So I've reset this picture. This has gone right back to the raw file, and you can see it's quite flat, and all the problems that we've looked at in previous videos. And let's start off with the contrast. So if I grab my contrast, okay, and you can see that that has had a visible effect on the luminance. Let's push this all the way, and you can see this has pushed it up there. Take this all the way back, and you can see it's a much flatter picture than it was. It's moved away from the end here, away from the end here. And if we stick that into RGB value, you can see the values of the individual colours here as well. So putting that back to the centre, moving it up there, and you can see the ends pushing out towards the blacks and pushing out towards the whites. Okay, so we've got a fair amount of contrast in here, and that's nice, but it doesn't really complete what I was looking for. So what I would tend to do is to take this contrast tool back a little bit, and I would do the rest of the work in the tone curve. So starting off with this very small correction, that gives it a little bit more snap. But now let's have a look and see the difference we can make with a tone curve. Now, going on the reds, we're immediately seeing a little bit more red creeping into the picture. So if we examine, we've only gone one step, we're just over the one. If I push it up, wait for it to catch up, you're getting a marked red cast now on the picture. So this is a thing of small increments. So I get a little bit of red to warm it up a little bit. Now our greens, see if I take that down, then I'm bringing magenta in. You can immediately see the presence of that magenta cast. Take that up, you can see the green coming in. And in some circumstances that might be quite good, but it's not the correction I'm looking for. These rocks have a distinctly redder tinge to them. And with the blues, I might like to keep some blues in the high end actually. So let's take that up a little bit. Okay, so that to me seems not unreasonable. Let's take that blue down. It's not really having much effect on the rest of the picture. It's because there is no yellows, possibly. So I might be inclined just to push that blue up at the high, and again, barely any. Reset that. The only one I think that's really adding much to the picture is the red, and we've got a very, very slight redness in there. What I'm going to do is just tweak it a tiny little bit more at the low end, because what I don't want to do is to start to move in on the sky area. Okay, so I think that pretty much demonstrates what we've set out to demonstrate, and an effective workflow on this is to go with the contrast until it begins to bite. So you're moving away from that flat raw file, you're bringing contrast into the picture, and then move on to the tone curve. Certainly when you're learning these tools, it's the easiest way forward is to do what I just described, sort of use the contrast tool just to bring a little bit of bite into the picture and amend that with very small adjustments in the tone curve. Okay, I think that does it. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope this clarifies and makes it easier for you to use the contrast tool and the tone curve together. I'm a big fan of the tone curve. I think it's a very powerful tool, but it is possible to get into a bit of a mess with it, I'll admit. So basically, small steps and often, and that's the way to learn the more complicated tools in here. Okay, thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to hit the like button, and if you'd like to subscribe as well, that would be absolutely fantastic. See you in the next video. Bye.